He was born on June 9, 1963, in Owensboro, Kentucky, a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling green hills and long summer nights that seemed to hum with crickets. His name was John Christopher Depp, too, but few could have guessed that this boy, with his dark eyes and shy smile, would one day become one of the most enigmatic actors in the world. Johnny was the youngest of 4 children. His father, John Christopher Depp Sr., worked as a civil engineer, a practical and disciplined man. His mother, Betty Sue Palmer, was a waitress, strong-willed, loving, and endlessly hardworking. The family didn't have much money, but they had music, laughter, and a fierce sense of togetherness. Still, life was not easy. The Depps moved constantly, from Kentucky to Florida, from one town to another, chasing work and stability. By the time Johnny was 15, the family had moved more than 20 times. Johnny never felt rooted. Each new school meant new faces, new hallways, and the same feeling of being an outsider. He was quiet, observant, and often retreated into his imagination. Books, music, and drawing were his escape, but when his mother gifted him a guitar at the age of 12, something clicked deep inside him. The moment his fingers strummed the strings, he felt an electricity that no classroom or conversation could ever match. He started to teach himself, late nights alone in his room, copying chords from rock songs, dreaming of the stage lights he'd never seen. Music became his voice. By the time he reached high school, he had joined a band called The Kids, a local rock group that played small gigs in bars and garages. They weren't famous, but they were hungry. Johnny played with a quiet intensity, his long hair falling over his eyes, lost in the sound. But at home, life was fracturing. His parents' marriage was falling apart. Johnny watched arguments turn into silences into separation. When he was 15, his father left. It was sudden. A shock that left the young boy confused and angry. Johnny tried to channel his pain through music, but inside something hardened. He once said later in an interview, "When my father left, I remember thinking that I had to become a man immediately. School no longer mattered to him. He dropped out at 16 to pursue music full-time. His mother, though worried, didn't stop him. 'Follow your dream,' she said, perhaps seeing in him the restless spirit she'd always carried herself. Johnny left home, guitar slung over his shoulder, chasing the idea that music could save him. For a few years, he and the Kids played across Florida, opening for small-time acts, earning just enough to eat. But in 1983, when Johnny was 20, the band took a big leap. They packed up and moved to Los Angeles, the city of dreams and heartbreak. They wanted a record deal. They wanted to be seen. It was in that sprawling, glittering city, where the streets smelled of ambition and broken promises, that Johnny Depp's real story began. Not as a musician, but as something entirely unexpected. One night, while struggling to pay rent, Johnny met a young actor named Nicolas Cage. Cage, already working in films, saw something in Johnny. A quiet intensity, a presence that felt cinematic. He asked him almost casually, "Have you ever thought about acting?" Johnny laughed it off at first. He wasn't an actor, he was a guitarist. But Cage persisted, introducing him to his agent and encouraging him to audition. Johnny needed money. He needed direction. So he said yes. And that single, uncertain yes, spoken by a broke musician, with no acting experience, would change everything. Los Angeles in the early 1980s was both dream and illusion, a city that glittered at night and burned in the daylight. Neon lights promised fame, but the streets were full of broken instruments, rejected scripts, and hungry souls. For Johnny Depp, it was the city of almosts, almost getting signed, almost making rent, almost giving up. His band, The Kids, played in small clubs along the Sunset Strip, chasing record executives who never returned their calls. Johnny still believed in music. It was all he had ever known. But the dream was slipping. Money ran out fast. He sold pens over the phone to survive, working long hours in tiny, airless offices where ambition went to die. One day, Nicolas Cage called him again. "Go to this audition," Cage told him. "It's a horror movie, low budget. Just try." Johnny hesitated. He had never studied acting, never stood in front of a camera. but he needed the money. So he went. The audition was for A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, directed by Wes Craven. Johnny didn't even want the part. He just wanted a few dollars to buy food and pay rent. But fate works in strange ways. Craven's daughter happened to be at the casting session and noticed the quiet young man with messy hair and dark, soulful eyes. "Dad," she said, "he's cute. You should cast him." And just like that, Johnny Depp got his first movie role. Glenn Lance, the boy who gets pulled into his bed and devoured by Freddy Krueger in one of the film's most iconic scenes. The film was a surprise hit. It became a classic of the horror genre, and for the first time, Johnny's face appeared on theater screens across America. Yet he didn't feel like a movie star. He was just a kid who'd stumbled into acting. "I didn't want to be an actor," he would later say. "I just fell into it." Still, something about the process fascinated him. The set, the energy, the way a story could come alive through emotion. It felt strangely similar to music. Acting, like playing guitar, required rhythm, instinct, and truth. But Hollywood had its own rhythm, and Johnny didn't fit into it. After A Nightmare on Elm Street, he got small parts here and there, in Private Resort, 1985, and Platoon, 1986 by Oliver Stone, where he played a quiet soldier lost in the chaos of war. He respected the craft but still didn't feel at home. Then came 1987, the year that would make him famous. A television producer saw something in Johnny's brooding presence and cast him as Officer Tom Hansen in a new show called 21 Jump Street. It was about young-looking cops going undercover in high schools. The concept sounded silly to Johnny, but he needed work. He signed on. The show became an instant success. Overnight, Johnny Depp went from an unknown actor to a teen idol. His face was everywhere, on posters, magazines, fan letters pouring in by the thousands. Teenagers adored him. Producers celebrated him. But Johnny hated it. He didn't want to be the pretty face of Hollywood. He wanted to be taken seriously as an artist. "I felt like I was in a machine," he said later. "They wanted to shape me into something I wasn't." Fame for him was never the dream. It was the distraction. He felt trapped in the role that had made him rich, a prisoner of popularity. He began clashing with producers, rejecting scripts, and searching for something deeper. During those years, he met people who would change his life. One of them was Tim Burton, the visionary director known for his dark, eccentric imagination. They met through mutual friends, and Burton saw in Johnny a kindred spirit, someone strange, misunderstood, and full of hidden emotion. But that meeting would not bloom into collaboration just yet. Johnny had more storms to weather first. By the end of the 1980s, he was rich but restless, famous but unsatisfied. Music still haunted him. He played guitar late at night, scribbling lyrics, thinking of what could have been if fame hadn't found him in such an unexpected way. Then, in 1990, everything changed. Again. Tim Burton called. He had a script, he said, about a man who wasn't quite human, a man with scissors for hands. A story about loneliness, love, and the search for identity. Burton told him, "Johnny, I think you'll understand this character better than anyone." And he was right. When Tim Burton called, Johnny Depp didn't hesitate. The project was called Edward Scissorhands, and the script, strange, sad, and poetic, spoke to him in a way nothing else ever had. It told the story of a man created by an inventor, left incomplete, with scissors instead of hands. A gentle soul trapped in a world that feared him. Johnny read it once and felt an ache inside. "I knew Edward," he would later say. "I was Edward, misunderstood, quiet, trying to find a place where I belonged." The role was risky. The studio wanted a more conventional star. Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, even Michael Jackson had been considered. But Burton insisted. He saw in Johnny a vulnerability that could carry the character's heart. When filming began in 1990, Johnny was 27. For the first time, he felt free. There were no teenage uniforms, no television cliches, no forced smiles. Just emotion, imagination, and truth. He buried himself in the role. Minimal dialogue, expressive eyes, movements that blended sadness and wonder. He spoke more with silence than words. The result was magic. Edward Scissorhands became a critical and cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just a movie. It was art. Burton's Gothic fairy tale touched audiences around the world, and Johnny's performance transformed him from a reluctant TV star into a serious, respected actor. People began to see him differently. He wasn't just handsome. He was different. There was depth behind his eyes, mystery in his gestures. Hollywood had found a new kind of leading man, one who didn't fit the mold, but fame never sat comfortably with Johnny. Even at the height of his early success, he kept his distance from the Hollywood lifestyle. He avoided red carpets, distrusted the press, and sought roles that defied expectations. He followed Edward Scissorhands with a series of daring choices. The eccentric outsider in Benny and June, 1993. The troubled writer in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, 1993. The tragic poet in Dead Man, 1995. And the fearless undercover agent in Donnie Brasco, 1997. Each role seemed to echo something inside him. Isolation, rebellion, the search for authenticity. Johnny didn't want to act characters. He wanted to become them. He once said, "I don't want to be a product. I want to tell stories that matter." That attitude earned him admiration and confusion. Studio executives didn't know what to do with someone who turned down blockbusters for strange, quiet films. But artists and directors loved him. His collaboration with Tim Burton deepened. Together, they created a visual language, haunting, whimsical, and profoundly human. In 1994, they reunited for Ed Wood, a black-and-white biopic about one of Hollywood's most infamous directors. The film flopped commercially, but won critical acclaim. Johnny's portrayal was fearless, quirky yet deeply empathetic. It earned him respect from critics and peers who now saw him as one of the most original talents of his generation. Around that time, his personal life began drawing attention too. He dated high-profile figures, Sherilyn Fenn, Winona Ryder, and his relationship with Winona became a cultural obsession. He famously tattooed Winona Forever on his arm. When they broke up, he changed it to Wino Forever. It was a small act that said everything about his sense of humor and heartbreak. The 1990s were a golden yet complicated time. Johnny was making art on his own terms, but fame was always watching. Paparazzi followed him, tabloids invented stories, and fans treated him like an idol. He tried to hide in plain sight, in dark clubs, behind guitars, in characters that spoke more truth than he could say in interviews. He also met Kate Moss, the supermodel whose wild spirit matched his own. Together, they became the face of 1990s counterculture, beautiful, reckless, and untamed. Their relationship burned bright and fast, fueled by passion and chaos. Professionally, Johnny's star continued to rise. He worked with some of the best, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, and Jim Jarmusch. Yet he still struggled with identity. Was he a musician who acted or an actor who dreamed of music? In 1998, he starred in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, playing the eccentric writer Hunter S. Thompson, whom he befriended in real life. The two became inseparable, sharing long conversations, wild nights, and an enduring respect for rebellion. Hunter called Johnny a rare spirit, half poet, half pirate. And maybe that was true. The boy from Kentucky who once strummed a guitar in his bedroom was now one of the most respected, unpredictable actors in Hollywood. But fame, as always, came with shadows, behind the artistry. Johnny struggled with excess, alcohol, late nights, and the constant noise of celebrity. He bought a club in Los Angeles called the Viper Room, where artists and outsiders gathered. It became legendary and infamous when young actor River Phoenix tragically died outside its doors in 1993. The event haunted Johnny deeply. By the end of the decade, he had everything he once dreamed of: success, respect, freedom. But he was still restless. He needed a role that would redefine him once again, and it would come, unexpectedly, from the open sea. By the early 2000s, Johnny Depp had already earned a reputation as Hollywood's resident misfit, the actor who refused to play by anyone's rules. He was admired by critics, adored by filmmakers, and loved by audiences who sensed something authentic in his strangeness. But he had never been a blockbuster star. That would change in 2003. in the most unexpected way possible. Walt Disney Pictures had a risky idea, a pirate movie based on one of their theme park rides. It sounded absurd. Pirate films had been dead for decades, and no one expected much from Pirates of the Caribbean. The Curse of the Black Pearl. The studio wanted an action hero, someone charming, brave, and traditional. Then Johnny Depp showed up. From the moment he walked into rehearsals as Captain Jack Sparrow, everyone knew something strange was happening. He slurred his speech, swayed as if perpetually drunk, and moved with a flamboyant grace that felt both comedic and mysterious. When Disney executives saw early footage, they panicked. "Is he drunk?" one asked. "Is he gay? Is he insane?" Johnny smiled. "He's a pirate," he said. In truth, he had modeled the character after Keith Richards, the legendary Rolling Stones guitarist, a man who lived like a pirate in real life. "To me," Johnny later explained, "pirates were rock stars of their time, rebellious, wild, misunderstood." Director Gore Verbinski trusted Johnny's instincts. He let him improvise, twist lines, and bring his own rhythm to the role. What emerged was something never seen before. A pirate who was both foolish and brilliant, cowardly and brave, selfish and noble. When the film hit theaters in July 2003, it exploded. Audiences around the world fell in love with Jack Sparrow, the swaggering, smirking captain who stole every scene. Critics called Johnny's performance a masterpiece of eccentricity. Children dressed like him for Halloween. Adults quoted his lines in bars, and suddenly, the misfit who had spent 2 decades avoiding fame became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Johnny Depp, once the outsider, was now a global superstar. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, a stunning achievement for a role that was never meant to be taken seriously. Disney rushed to greenlight sequels, and Johnny returned to the sea with Dead Man's Chest 2006 and At World's End 2007, both of which broke box office records. But beneath the success, Johnny remained grounded. He didn't crave the spotlight, he craved connection. He often said, "I don't do movies for money. I do them because I fall in love with characters." It was also during this time that his personal life found stability. In 1998, while filming The Ninth Gate in France, he met French singer and actress Vanessa Paradis. She was calm where he was chaotic, soft-spoken where he was restless. Together, they built a quiet life away from Hollywood, in a small French village surrounded by vineyards and olive trees. In 1999, their daughter Lily Rose Depp was born, followed by their son Jack in 2002. For the first time, Johnny felt peace. "Having children gave me life," he said. "They showed me what love really means." While his movies made millions, he spent much of his time painting, writing music, and playing guitar with friends. He even performed with rock icons like Keith Richards, Iggy Pop, and Marilyn Manson. Fame no longer defined him. Art did. In the late 2000s, he continued collaborating with Tim Burton on projects that celebrated the weird and wonderful, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, 2005, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, 2007, and Alice in Wonderland, 2010. Each role pushed him further into the realm of the surreal. Sweeney Todd earned him another Oscar nomination, and his partnership with Burton became one of the most iconic in film history. "Johnny understands sadness," Burton once said. "He gives humanity to monsters." But as his fame reached impossible heights, the pressure began to mount. Endless interviews, paparazzi, tabloid rumors. The noise grew louder. And though he smiled for the cameras, there were cracks beneath the surface. In private, Johnny struggled with the same demons that had haunted him since youth: anxiety, insomnia, the need to escape. The more the world demanded of him, the more he withdrew into music, painting, and quiet nights with his family in France. Still, he remained loyal to his craft. He took risks others wouldn't, from playing the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland to the gangster Whitey Bulger in Black Mass, 2015, a chilling role that reminded the world of his depth as a dramatic actor. By the mid-2010s, Johnny Depp had achieved everything: critical acclaim, wealth, family, and cultural immortality. He had become a symbol of individuality, proof that success doesn't require conformity. But as with all great stories, peace never lasts forever. Storm clouds were forming, not on a film set, but in his personal life. And soon, they would consume everything he had built. By the late 2000s, Johnny Depp wasn't just a movie star, he was a phenomenon. His face was on posters, billboards, and toys across the globe. Children pretended to be Captain Jack Sparrow in their backyards. Adults quoted his witty lines from Pirates of the Caribbean. He had become something few actors ever achieve, a cultural icon. But behind that charm and swagger was a man still uneasy with fame. Johnny had never wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be understood. He often said in interviews, "Fame is a strange beast. It gives you everything and takes everything away." Despite his discomfort, he treated his fans with an unusual kind of sincerity. He would stop for hours to sign autographs, take photos, or just listen to people's stories. To him, those moments mattered more than red carpets or awards. He also used his success for good. Johnny frequently visited children's hospitals, dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow, unannounced, unpaid, and entirely in character. He'd walk into rooms, cracking jokes, making kids laugh. Nurses often cried watching him. "If I can make one child smile," he said, "that's the best film I'll ever do." Professionally, the Pirates franchise kept growing. He became one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, earning over $50 million per film. But with each sequel, Johnny grew more detached from the machinery of fame. Jack Sparrow was never meant to be a product, he said. He was a spirit, a free soul. As he drifted further into art, music, and painting, he began to withdraw from the Hollywood social scene. The world saw him as eccentric. His friends saw him as gentle and thoughtful. He filled his homes with books, guitars, and paintings of people he admired. Kerouac, Thompson, Richards, Brando. His life was a museum of rebellion, but no artist escapes storms forever. In 2012, after more than a decade together, Johnny and Vanessa Paradis announced their separation. It was mutual and respectful, but deeply painful. "We've been together for 14 years, he said. "We have 2 beautiful children, and we will always care for each other." He remained a devoted father. His daughter, Lily Rose, began modeling and acting, inheriting his quiet intensity and her mother's grace. Johnny often said his greatest achievement wasn't a film, it was being a father. Then, in 2015, he married Amber Heard, an actress he had met while filming The Rum Diary. The wedding was small and private, but soon, their relationship became the subject of constant media scrutiny. At first, everything seemed idyllic. They appeared at events together, smiling and affectionate. But behind closed doors, tensions were rising. What began as love slowly turned into conflict, and by 2016, Amber filed for divorce, accusing Johnny of abuse. The news hit like a thunderclap. For the first time, the public turned on him. Headlines painted him as a villain. Studios hesitated. Roles disappeared. The man once celebrated as Hollywood's rebel hero was now at the center of one of the most divisive scandals in entertainment history. Johnny denied the allegations. "The truth will come out," he said quietly, refusing to engage in public arguments. But the damage was done. The internet divided, half believed him, half condemned him. His name became a battlefield of opinions, hashtags, and outrage. In 2018, The Washington Post published an op-ed by Amber Heard, implying she was a survivor of domestic violence. Though she never mentioned his name, the implication was clear. Johnny sued for defamation, beginning a long, painful legal war that would dominate the next several years of his life. While his personal world collapsed, his artistic life began to fade too. Disney quietly dropped him from future Pirates films. Warner Brothers removed him from the Fantastic Beasts franchise. Hollywood, once his playground, had turned its back. Yet even in the darkest moments, Johnny refused to break. He turned to his oldest refuge, music. He joined his friend Jeff Beck on tour, playing guitar across Europe. On stage, he smiled again. There were no scripts, no cameras, no judgments. Just sound and emotion. "Music saved me," he said. "It's the only truth I know." He also focused on painting, portraits of heroes, friends, and lost souls. His artwork sold out instantly when he released it to the public in 2022. People weren't just buying paintings. They were supporting the man they believed had been unfairly silenced. Then, in 2022, the world watched as Johnny's defamation trial unfolded in Virginia. For 6 weeks, millions tuned in every day. It was no longer just a legal battle. It was a cultural reckoning. Testimonies, recordings, and evidence painted a complex, painful picture of two broken people. When the verdict was announced, ruling in Johnny's favor, the courtroom fell silent. He wasn't there. He was in England, playing music. But when the decision reached him, he said only, "The jury gave me my life back." For the first time in years, he smiled without pretending. He didn't celebrate with parties or interviews. Instead, he thanked his fans, the people who had stood by him through chaos and ruin. "Truth never perishes," he wrote in a quiet statement. Johnny Depp had walked through fire, and somehow survived. When the courtroom doors closed behind him, Johnny Depp was no longer just an actor. He had become a symbol. To some, he was the fallen hero reclaiming his honor. To others, he was a man whose sins had finally caught up with him. But to himself, he was simply tired of noise, of judgment, of misunderstanding. The years leading up to the 2022 trial had been brutal. In 2020, a court case in the UK against a British tabloid had gone against him. The newspaper had called him a wife-beater, and though Johnny maintained his innocence, the judge ruled in favor of the publication. The decision cost him not only public image, but also his role in Fantastic Beasts. For many, it felt like the end of his career. Studios distanced themselves, friends stayed silent. Doors closed. The man who had once commanded global box offices was now living in quiet exile, painting and playing music in the English countryside. But he never stopped believing that truth mattered. When the defamation trial in the US began in April 2022, the world watched with an intensity rarely seen before. Every expression, every sentence, every tear was broadcast across screens worldwide. It wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a theater of truth and pain. Johnny sat quietly in court, dressed in his usual calm, understated way. He spoke softly, choosing his words carefully. "The truth is all I have left," he told the jury. "And I've spoken it." The weeks dragged on. Testimonies became tabloid fodder. Social media turned into a battlefield of hashtags and memes. But amid the chaos, something shifted. People began to see him again, not as a caricature, but as a human being. When the verdict finally arrived, it was a moment of silence before the storm of relief. The jury found that he had been defamed and awarded him damages. Johnny wasn't celebrating victory. He was reclaiming dignity. He later said, "I hope my story helps others, men or women, who've been through this, to stand up and tell their truth." After the trial, Johnny disappeared from the Hollywood spotlight. He didn't want the noise of redemption tours or interviews. He wanted peace. He retreated to Europe, where he found quiet and music once again. He joined his old friend Beck, touring cities across the UK and Europe. The two played blues, rock, and soulful covers that spoke of loss and resilience. On stage, Johnny smiled genuinely for the first time in years. "Music doesn't judge you," he said. "It just listens." When Beck passed away in early 2023, Johnny was devastated. "He was my brother," he said, his voice breaking. "He gave me back my voice when I'd almost lost it." Still, he kept moving forward. He returned to painting, creating vivid portraits of his heroes: Bob Dylan, Al Pacino, Heath Ledger. In mid-2023, he released his first art collection, Friends and Heroes, which sold out within hours. His artwork, raw and emotional, revealed more of his heart than words ever could. He also directed a new film, Modì, about the Italian artist Amedeo Modigliani, his first directorial effort in over 25 years. It was a fitting story, an artist misunderstood in his lifetime, fighting for the right to be seen as he truly was. Johnny said, "It's not about proving anyone wrong anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can still create." Though Hollywood remained cautious, Europe embraced him. At the Cannes Film Festival 2023, He returned to the red carpet for Jeanne du Barry, where he played King Louis XV. As he walked up the steps, the crowd erupted into a 7-minute standing ovation. Johnny's eyes filled with tears. Later, in an interview, he said softly, "I don't need Hollywood. Hollywood needs me, or maybe it never did. Either way, I'm okay." He now lives a quieter life, painting, recording music, and spending time with his children. He has found joy in the small things, a good guitar, a canvas, a conversation over wine. Fame, he learned, is fleeting. Art endures. Those close to him say he has changed, gentler, calmer, wiser. He doesn't chase the past or bitterness. Instead, he often reflects on the lessons of his journey. The truth, he says, is not always beautiful, but it's the only thing worth living for. Even after everything, the rise, the fall, the fire, the forgiveness, Johnny Depp remains what he has always been, an artist searching for meaning in chaos. And maybe that's why the world still can't look away. The years had softened Johnny Depp, but they had not dimmed him. The wild heart of the boy from Owensboro, Kentucky, still beat beneath the lines on his face. The same curiosity that had once led him from small-town stages to Hollywood remained, now tempered by experience, humility, and a deeper sense of peace. He was no longer chasing characters or applause. He had become the storyteller behind them. In the quiet of his French village, mornings began slowly. Coffee in hand, he'd sit by a window overlooking the hills, sunlight brushing the worn pages of a book. Sometimes he'd sketch, other times he'd write notes for a future song or film idea. "Creation," he often said, "isn't a choice. It's oxygen." He spoke less in interviews, but when he did, his words carried weight. "Fame," he said once, "is the most fragile thing on earth. It gives you everything, and then it takes away everything that matters." When asked how he wanted to be remembered, he smiled faintly. "Not as a movie star," he said, "as someone who tried to tell the truth, even when it hurt." A legacy beyond the screen. Johnny's filmography remains one of the most unique in modern cinema, a gallery of outsiders and dreamers. From Edward Scissorhands, the lonely creation with scissors for hands, to Captain Jack Sparrow, the pirate who danced between madness and genius, every role seemed to mirror a piece of his own soul. "I've always played the misfits," he once said, "maybe because I am one." But his legacy isn't confined to the screen. It extends to music, art, and the quiet courage of a man who refused to be defined by scandal or headlines. For younger artists, Johnny became a reminder that authenticity, though costly, is worth every wound. In the years following his return, universities invited him to speak about creativity and resilience. At one such talk in 2025, he told students, "Don't create to be liked. Create because it's the only way you can breathe. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more honest ones." The audience rose in applause, not for the celebrity, but for the survivor standing before them, scarred but unbroken. On love and loss, Johnny's reflections on love had grown wiser too. "Love," he said, "isn't about possession. It's about witness, standing beside someone through their light and their shadow." He maintained close ties with his children, proud of their independence and creativity. When Lily Rose's career in film and modeling soared, he told her quietly, "Don't let them define you. Define yourself." He often said that becoming a father had been the truest role he ever played. "It teaches you patience," he smiled, "and humility. Kids don't care how many awards you have. They just want you to be there." There were also friendships, deep, enduring ones. From Al Pacino to Tim Burton, from Marilyn Manson to Paul Bettany, those who knew Johnny described him as fiercely loyal, quietly generous. "He gives without asking for anything back," Burton once said. "That's why I've worked with him for decades. He creates with his heart." And then there were the fans, millions who never stopped believing. Letters poured in from around the world, people who said his courage helped them survive their own storms. "They don't owe me anything," Johnny said. "But if my story gave someone hope, then maybe it was worth the pain." An artist's redemption. As time passed, Johnny's work evolved. Less spectacle, more sincerity. He focused on independent films, choosing projects that spoke of humanity rather than heroism. His 2024 directorial project, Modì, premiered to critical acclaim. Hailed as a deeply personal meditation on art, suffering, and the price of authenticity. Critics called it his final act of liberation. But Johnny shrugged off such grand titles. "There's no final act," he said. "Only another page." He continued to paint, often holding small exhibitions under pseudonyms. He preferred anonymity now. The joy of seeing someone moved by his art without realizing it was his. Music, too, never left his life. Some nights he'd join local musicians in small European bars, blending into the crowd, playing old blues tunes. "That," he said, "is freedom. When no one cares who you are, only how you play." The quiet ending of a loud story by 2025, Johnny had found what he'd been chasing all his life: peace through creation. He no longer feared silence. He embraced it. It was in silence that he found his truest art, his deepest love, his purest joy. He looked back on his journey. The boy who dreamed of music, the actor who became an icon, the man who lost everything and then rebuilt it from ashes, and he smiled. "If you take away the fame, the scandals, the money, what's left?" he said in a final interview. "A storyteller, a father, a friend. That's enough." And maybe that's what Johnny Depp's legacy truly is. Not the roles, not the headlines, but the human behind them. A man who stumbled, bled, and still chose to create beauty from his wounds. As he once told a young filmmaker who asked for advice, "Don't fear the fall. Fear not trying. The fall is how you learn to fly." And in that single truth, raw, humble, and eternal, Johnny Depp's story finds its final breath. A life not defined by what he lost, but by what he never stopped giving: art, truth, and the courage to be imperfectly real. There is a certain kind of peace that only comes after war, not the peace of victory, but the peace of survival. For Johnny Depp, that peace arrived quietly, without applause or headlines, on an ordinary morning in the French countryside. The sun was rising over the hills of Plan de la Tour, painting the sky in gold and violet. Birds moved lazily through the olive trees. The air smelled of lavender and coffee. Johnny sat on his porch, guitar on his lap, sketchbook beside him. The world was quiet, and so was he. It had been more than 40 years since he first picked up a guitar in Kentucky, dreaming of songs. More than 30 since he'd stepped in front of a camera for A Nightmare on Elm Street. He had lived 1,000 lives: musician, heartthrob, misfit, pirate, outcast, survivor. Each one left a scar, a song, and a story. He strummed a few chords, soft, haunting notes that hung in the air like old memories. A melody without words, but full of meaning. He smiled to himself. "Still playing," he murmured. "Still here." Inside, his art studio was filled with paintings, some finished, others waiting. Portraits of friends, heroes, and ghosts. A canvas of his mother, Betty Sue, watched from the corner, her eyes proud, gentle. He often talked to her while painting. "You'd laugh if you saw this life, Mom," he said once. "You'd tell me to stop worrying so damn much." On the far wall hung a quote he'd written in paint, crooked but clear. "Art is not what you see. It's what saves you." And that was the truth of it all. Art had saved him. When the world turned away, art listened. When words failed, music spoke. When he fell, creation caught him. A life beyond the screen. Occasionally, journalists still sought him out, chasing the ghost of the star he once was. But Johnny didn't care much for interviews anymore. He'd learned that silence often told the better story. He preferred to show rather than speak. A painting, a melody, a look. These were his languages now. He still acted, sometimes choosing projects that mattered. Roles that said something about being human, imperfect, fragile, beautiful in brokenness. And though he no longer sought Hollywood's spotlight, it sometimes found him. When he walked a red carpet in 2026 for Modì, there were no fireworks, no spectacle, only quiet respect. The audience saw not a fallen star, but a man reborn. Critics praised the film as a love letter to misunderstood artists. But Johnny, standing in the back of the theater, only smiled. "It's not a comeback," he whispered. "It's a conversation." The weight of grace as the years passed, his movements slowed but his spirit did not. He stayed close to his children, often visiting Lily Rose during her own film shoots. They would sit together, sharing stories about life, about the industry, about art. "You're stronger than I ever was at your age," he told her once. "That's the point. You're supposed to be." Jack, his son, inherited his father's love for music. The two sometimes jammed together late into the night, Johnny on guitar, Jack on piano. "That's my favorite sound in the world," Johnny said once, listening to the notes drift into the dark. He no longer feared getting older. In fact, he welcomed it. "Age," he told a friend, "isn't the loss of youth. It's the arrival of understanding." He had come to understand that happiness was not a stage, or a spotlight, or a standing ovation. It was the quiet moment between breaths, the stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove. The final reflection. On a late summer evening, Johnny sat beneath the stars, a glass of red wine in hand. The cicadas hummed and a warm breeze rustled the trees. His friend asked him softly, "If you could do it all again, would you?" Johnny thought for a moment, eyes fixed on the night sky. Then he smiled. "Every mistake," he said, "every heartbreak, every wrong turn, because without them, I wouldn't be me." He paused, then added quietly, "And being me, after everything, is finally enough." The night grew still. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed. Johnny leaned back, humming a tune, one of his own. The melody drifted upward, into the stars, into memory. And that was how his story ended. Not with fame or tragedy, but with peace. A man who had lost everything the world said mattered, only to find what truly did. Truth, love, and art. Final words. Johnny Depp's life, in all its chaos and brilliance, became something greater than a Hollywood tale. It became a testament that even in the darkest corners, light survives. That an artist's worth isn't measured by applause, but by endurance, and that the most beautiful stories are not those without pain, but those written through it. He once said, "If I could tell the world one thing, it would be this. Never let them silence your song. Even broken strings can still make music," and he did. Until the very end, Johnny Depp kept playing his song, softly, truthfully, beautifully.